We're halfway
Good
there.
afternoon. Welcome to everyone to AIA California's introductory webinar on the fellowship process. I'm Rona Rothenberg, first Vice President, President-elect of AIA California. With several fellow colleagues who are serving as regional representatives of the AIA College of Fellows, we will introduce you to the program of the College of Fellows. Hopefully, we will fully demystify the process for you and help you to consider a personal journey to recognition of your significant career contributions, past, present, and future, to the profession by your peers, by elevation someday to the College of Fellows. Next slide, please. First, a bit of housekeeping. We will try to keep the substance of this 90-minute webinar presentation to about an hour to honor your schedules and leave the last 30 to 40 minutes for questions. We will be recording the webinar and will post it up in the AIA webpage in a new section for the College of Fellows resources with all the links and the chapter and national contact information and references noted here. If you have questions, please remember to put them into the Q&A. Some of them may be answered in writing, and others, if we don't get to them, they will be provided when we post up. I think someone may have a small device next to the computer, if so, please mute it. The videos are turned off for best reception. Next slide, please. As an architect with a career in project management in industry and government, I had the usual misconceptions that I could not qualify as a fellow. I was wrong. That's a myth. More about that later. Elevated in Boston in 2008, after 3 tries in Category 4, Government and Industry, I appreciated an acknowledgement of my contributions to the profession as an owner's rep for public and corporate building programs, and the collegial contacts I've made with public architects all over the world and people that I've worked with over the years. I'd like to introduce you to our regional reps. Presently, each of them will speak a bit about themselves. Michael Enomoto, FAIA, Robert Uli, FAIA, Joel Tomei, FAIA, and Aaron Highland, FAIA, 2 for Northern California, 2 for Southern California. And with that, Michael, would you like to start?
Hi, thank you for joining us, and it's really a privilege and an honor to be talking to you today. My name is Michael Enomoto. I'm the managing partner of Rune Associates. I've been practicing architecture for about 50 years now, and I was elevated to the College of Fellows in 2007. I'm just really pleased to be able to be here with you and try to answer your questions. Robert?
Thank you, Michael, and welcome everyone. Welcome fellows and future fellows. My background is public sector architecture and government practice with a focus on historic preservation, fire stations, clinics, mental health facilities, and office space. And I was elevated into the College of Fellows based upon this body of work and policy work that rippled across the country in the public sector. I'm delighted to serve as one of your Southern California regional representatives and on the executive board of AIA California. Joel?
Thank you. My name is Joel Tomei. I was invested into the College of Fellows in Atlanta. I was actually with Robert at that time. I didn't know him at that time. I'm pleased to get more comfortable with being with him now. And that was in 2015. And I received my fellowship in Object 2 practice. That was the category for my fellowship. I've been in conventional practice of architecture in Chicago, Boston, and in the San Francisco Bay Area for a total of 50 years. So Michael and I are kind of the old guys here. More recently, I've provided consulting services, and I was a seasoned professional and committee member for the AIA San Francisco Mentorship Program for 8 years. In 2017, I became a Northern California regional representative for the College of Fellows, which is a 3-year term. This will be my last year this year as a regional representative. I will miss it terribly. In 2022, Emily Marthinson, FAIA, will be taking my place as the newest California Northern representative, sharing this with College of Fellows Northern California Regional Representative Aaron John Highland, FAIA. Aaron?
Great, thanks, Joel. I'm Aaron Highland, and I'm a preservation architect in San Francisco. I've been practicing here in the Bay Area for over 30 years now. I'm currently a sole practitioner, working on some select preservation projects, but primarily I'm consulting with design firms on how to build capacity in their practice. I was elevated in 2019, and so I guess I lucked out. 2020 and 2021 classes didn't get to walk the stage due to the pandemic. So let's hope that any of you watching are going to be in the 2022 class and will be able to walk the stage then. I submitted under Object 2, and as we will talk about, the golden thread under practice management, my golden thread was leadership in 3 primary role areas, one being private practice, another being civic engagement and volunteer work, and then the third in education. I was luckily successful in my first attempt, but it wasn't actually my first attempt. I put together my first draft 1 year, and our chapter, AIA San Francisco chapter fellows committee advised me that it wasn't ready. So I sat out that year and I did it the following year and was luckily elevated. As the Northern California rep, and I know Emily Marthinson shares this vision and we'll work together over the coming years, we want to increase the numbers of fellows that are elevated and primarily increasing the diversity. So we want to reach out and make sure that those that are underrepresented in the college can be elevated and guided into this process. So thank you for joining us today. Back to you, Rona.
Thank you all. Next slide. This should be a map of California. Oh, could you go back to, yeah, there you go. Thank you. So there, just a few facts. There are about 125,000 architects in the United States. 98,000 are members of the AIA. And the AIA has chapters all over the country. The big states have more chapters, of course. And here in California, we have our California chapter, and then we have 21 components. And this map shows you how it's broken up. You may be familiar with your chapter or not. Some chapters have fellowship committees, some don't. But being a large state, we have 21,000 architects licensed here or eligible to be licensed, and 11,000 are members, but we are the voice of the profession here. And our reps and I and other leaders, we're all represent you and hope to connect you to the resources in your chapter, Northern California or Southern. So about the college, I'm going to pass the floor to Michael, followed by your other regional reps to talk all about the fellowship process, and then we'll come back at the end to talk about myths and answer some of your questions.
Thank you, Rona. So let's talk a little bit about the AIA College of Fellows. The college was founded relatively recently in my mind, 1952, and it's comprised of members of the AIA Institute who are elevated to the fellowship by a jury of our peers. So it's a relatively new group. Fellowship is one of the highest honors that the AIA can bestow upon any member. Only the AIA National Gold Medal is higher. And here's a photo. I just found out that Aaron is in the upper right corner of this picture. This is one of the investitures we had, I guess now 3 years ago, Aaron. And this is hopefully what all of you are aiming for all the listeners today are aiming for, to be invested into the College of Fellows. The college has an executive committee comprised of our chancellor, John Costella, our vice chancellor, Roger Schwantz, our secretary, Francis Halsman, and our bursar, Ron Blitch. I think it's important to understand the mission of our college. A lot of people don't know what we're all about. We have basically three missions. The number one mission is to promote research and scholarly work. And that's embodied in two ways. The College of Fellows gives out what's called the Latrobe Prize, a $100,000 biannual research grant. We also have a number of emerging professional component grants, something that is given out annually. Next. The second thing we do, the second mission, is to mentor all the young architects and emerging professionals. And we have a two-way mentoring program dedicated to lifelong learning and leadership development. And we are part of the Young Architects Forum. And three, we're here to sustain the college, to truly sustain the college through the advancement of other fellows, and by building the College of Fellows Fund. And you'll hear later about the College of Fellows Fund, but today we're really talking about the Fellows Advancement today. So next, Robert.
Thank you, Michael. We all aspire to wear that black robe and get that bronze medal. So we're going to dig a little deeper into the document that becomes your story. And what's important, I believe, is that you've got to find this golden thread. Aaron mentioned it a minute ago. You want to make that golden thread really bright. It starts in your sponsorship letter, goes through your summary statement, marches through your accomplishments, highlights your exhibits, and points to your reference letters. It's kind of like that golden ticket in the chocolate factory. You know, if you get it, then you get in, and if not, you've got to try again. One clear thing is that you've got to prove whatever it is your case is saying. Next slide, please. There was one object added in recent years, number 6. We'll talk about that. Next slide. Design is likely the most popular and challenging of all the objects to try for. Your design work has to rise above the crowd, be nationally, internationally recognized, and award-winning. In 2021, there were 24% of the applicants were awarded elevation in Object 1. Next slide, please. Number 2, next slide. In this object, the jury is looking for clear evidence that you led the design team, were the chief designer, or held a primary role in the projects that make up your exhibits. And Aaron will talk about exhibits in a few minutes. They're not judging you on what you designed or the quality of those designs, but more importantly, that your work is widely recognized through awards and publications. Next slide. This object has the highest percentage of those who are elevated. In the 2021 class, almost 53% of the class was elevated under Object 3. This would include firm partners, principals, associate partners, junior partners. Must demonstrate that your work advanced the firm or the profession through your leadership. Firm given, did you go from 1 office to 4 offices as an example? Did you move the firm from a regional practice to a national practice? And it's important to remember that in this category, the awards are less important than demonstrating how you moved these things forward. Next slide. This is AIA focused or an allied profession focused. Oops, I think
we should just go back 2 slides, Robert.
Yeah, I think I'm off one. A little too fast there, Amanda. Number 3. Yeah, thanks. So here, this may be harsh, but the jury says, so what, when they're thinking about your nomination. So most of us involved in this organization in some way, local chapter, statewide committee, national board, what impact have you had on the profession or society? What'd you get done? And what impact did you have? Not just locally, you've got to show a ripple effect nationally or broader than that. All right, next slide. This should be 4. Thank you, Amanda. This is one of the most difficult objects to be elevated from. Only 6% of the nominees of 2021 were elevated in object 4. This is the object that Rona and I were elevated in. Historically, one of the most difficult objects. Public sector architects don't have a private practice, or the resources of private practice were very limited. Most governments don't encourage the pursuit of awards or publications. They want to stay under the radar. So oftentimes, as we're pursuing our career, the golden trail isn't very bright. So it takes us a little extra effort. So if you're in that category, Rona and I can certainly help in advising you. Next slide, please. Category number 5, 7% of the class of 2021 were elevated into this category. If your practice story is not strong enough, consider your impact on your volunteer efforts. This might include time that you spent on a planning commission, design review boards, local advocacy efforts. You just have to demonstrate that the impact and ripple effect of your efforts in those endeavors is bright and shiny. Next slide, please. This is the newest object. It tends to make sense because it allows the college to provide some focus on each of these 3 elements that were kind of buried in a couple of the other objects. So if you're submitting under education as an example, your exhibits, which Aaron will talk about later, can use your students' work as examples as long as you're clear on your impact on that student's work. If your writing and research is your topic, then you need to demonstrate its impact on the profession. Did something change in the profession as a result of your writing or research? As an example, a friend of mine locally here who was elevated when Aaron was elevated, he used an example of writing for the architectural graphic standards. He did that for a number of years, and that helped his elevation. Next slide, please. So, minimum qualifications. These are all good and very important. It's cumulative years, not consecutive years. So if you were a member and you took a break, you came back, and you're a member, you took a break, as long as you have 10 cumulative years. I can't overstate the meaning of good standing. The staff and the jury will look at good standing, and that includes your sponsor and your reference letters, and to some extent, your exhibits. Next slide. Next slide. So Aaron and I will kind of bounce back and forth in a second here. This is just the overview. I want to point out that your submission in total, from your sponsor letter to your reference letter, can't be more than 40 pages. However, you can get 3 extra pages if you use a cover and an index, which don't count for those page counts, but helps the jury navigate your submission. Aaron?
And so I'll talk a little bit about finding your sponsor. Next slide. So it must be an FAIA member or an AIA member who's been in good standing for 10 or more years. They need to write a one-page support letter. This is very important. Anytime you go beyond the technical limits of the submission requirements, you may be disqualified. So it's very important that the sponsor letter be no more than one page. You want to find someone who knows you very well, they know your work, and they can help you through this process. They can be your best advocate and your worst critic, and hopefully make this not only enjoyable, but also challenging for you to actually get through. They can sponsor more than one person, but their letters need to be very specific to your nomination package. And they really should need to know your accomplishments. So consider several people, think through your career, or if you're at the beginning of your career and you're thinking about what you need to set up going forward, just keep track of who you think knows and can speak to you and guide you through this process better than anyone else. But speak to several people and then ask them each who they think you should ask to be your sponsor, and then select one. And do consider, or I should say, don't go after a better known person. Don't think that you need to get that best renowned fellow in the college or best designer. Get someone who knows your accomplishments and can guide you in this process. And ideally, if they've done this before, then they can help you through the technical requirements as well. Next slide. One more. So they should be closely involved in your process. And speaking just from my own experience and speaking and talking with others, different sponsors have different amount of time to commit to this. So just be very open and help your sponsor if they don't have enough time to keep you on track. But use that in your consideration on who you select. Their letter should speak directly to your achievements, and per the requirements, they're the buffer between you and your references. So the references have to be in within a certain date, and ideally your sponsor is the one who's going to be dogging your references. But again, keep in touch with your sponsor because they're just as busy as you are and you may need to help. But this letter is kind of the item that sets the stage. This letter and your summary page, which Robert will talk about in a moment, is really the foundation that your juror, and we'll talk a little bit more about the jury process, but your juror, the person who is going to be reading and evaluating and presenting your package, is kind of your proxy. So the sponsor letter and your summary page, these two pages are kind of the place where you shine to make it as easy for them as possible. Robert?
Thank you. Next slide. So the summary is a one-page document. It basically boils your nomination down, your 39 pages, down to one page. And to make that an even bigger challenge, it's boiled down to the first 35 words of that page. Those would be the toughest 35 words that you've ever written. And you want to remember that golden thread. You're picking it up from the sponsor letter and tying it through your summary and all the way to your accomplishments and exhibits. It may be easier or best to write the summary closer to the end of putting your nomination document together so that you can summarize the story that you're telling. Some do it the opposite way. It contains the most challenging effort in terms of setting up your submission. I found it in my experience that it'd be helpful to tie the exhibits. You know, you say, I did XYZ project, then I would say, see exhibit 3.2 or something. It helps to navigate the jury through this. If the jury has to work for it, then it's going to be challenging. Next slide. Accomplishments are basically your resume. And it's divided into 3 sections: your significant work, honors, awards, and recognition, and publications either by you or about you. It's helpful to use thumbnails in the margins that relate to each one of your entries. And list all of the relevant work. I mean, the list can be quite extensive, but you want to focus on those projects and those accomplishments that highlight your case. As an example, you might have a thumbnail if it's a landscape format, you'll have a thumbnail in a left margin and then the date of the project, XYZ project to construct an office for a mega corporation in England, see exhibit 3.2 and Joe Smith's reference letter. That way you're tying everything together and making the work of the jury a little easier. For publications and presentations, show the cover of the magazine or the book or the title slide or program cover of a conference where you spoke. For honors and awards, show the image of the award. Show the logo of the entity that gave you recognition or a scan of the certificate if that was the case. Next slide. Now, the format, along with the points that are here on the slide, the format is important. You know, the jury is sitting in a conference room viewing a screen that has a 16:9 orientation. So landscape works best because it fills the entire screen, while portrait will leave a great portion of the screen black. So you want to take as much advantage of that technology as possible. Aaron's going to cover exhibits. Aaron.
Okay, next slide. Here we go. Next slide, please. Yeah, so I think Robert mentioned that there's 40 pages maximum. That's without your reference letters. Your reference letters are actually submitted separately, but you have 40 pages for your entire nomination package. 20 of those pages is in section 3, which is your exhibits. No more than 20 pages and no more than 10 exhibits. So realistically, if you're in design, you may want to show your best 5 projects with 4 pages each. On others, you may do 7 or 8 different exhibits and have multiple pages on some and 1 page on another. They do need to be attested to. So think about this along with your sponsor, the person who's your sponsor. Think about who the right person is to attest to each of your exhibits. You'll need to look at the AI website in the year that you're submitting because the specific technical requirements change slightly each year. For example, one year they allowed someone in your firm to attest to an exhibit, and the following year they said, no, you can't do that. They want a client or a partner firm. So make sure you look at that. And this will be someone who's actually signing your exhibit and making sure that what you say in there is actually correct. Keep your exhibits direct, succinct, and clear. Look at the AIA's website. There's each year they cull out what they consider the best examples of nomination packages. So look at them, look for format. Don't be fancy. This is not your time to be the best graphic designer. This is your time to tell your story. And your story is not your life story. It's a very narrow, specific, edited down version of what your impact in your career has been. So make sure that you think about that in your golden thread. It's not your entire life story. Be very specific. And in these section 3 exhibits, you want to do 3 things in your text. You want to tell them what the challenge was that you overcame, your role in the exhibit or in the project, and then the outcome or the impact that that had. Keep your text to about 100, 150 words and use the rest for pictures. More the pictures, the better. These exhibits are the tool that your reviewer, remember that the reviewer of the jury is going to be your proxy, and you want to make it as easy as possible for them to present your package to the other jury members. And I just can't emphasize it enough. Edit, edit, edit. Don't tell everything. Architects love to tell the entire story, especially on a project. You do not need to do that. Just mention the points that support your thread. Next slide. And finally, references. So this is very important to be strategic about. You have your sponsor letter, who's an important person who knows your practice and your impact. You have the people who are going to be attesting to each of your exhibits. And then you have 7 people who will provide reference letters. And that's if this is your first time submitting. If it's your second or third time, those original 7 letters stay on the file, and then you're allowed to supplement them each year with 3 additionals. 5 of your letters need to be either fellows or AIA members in good standing. And make sure that your reference letters only touch on 2 or 3 items. Don't have every reference letter speak to every thread in your summary page. And luck would have it, a fire engine's coming by. But and make sure that your references are geographically diverse. If you can, make sure that each piece of your summary page is represented, and if it has a national impact or an international impact, make sure you have other geographical regions represented in one of your reference letters. Next page. So in summary, again, be clear, concise. Get your sponsor, make sure it's a strong sponsor who can guide you. Be specific and make sure your references are specific and they all support your summary statement. And focus on the results of your achievements and the impact and the influence of the profession. Robert.
Thank you, Aaron. So that gives you, I'd like to think of it as drinking out of a fire hose version of your nomination. Now your nomination gets to the jury. And for the class of 2021, there were 239 submissions. They're divvied up among the jury members in an interesting way. Roughly, that means that each juror gets about 34 nominations. And if they spend an hour or so on your nomination, that's 40 hours per juror, or 280 hours of time. There's a great deal of effort that goes into reviewing that document, which is important that it be clear and concise and bright. This doesn't count the amount of time that the AIA staff spends verifying whether or not your sponsor, reference letters, and others are in good standing, and that each exhibit is signed, and that you, in fact, are in good standing. Next slide. So the jury members individually review your nomination. Then they gather in Washington, D.C. for a few days. It will take about 2.5 days or so to get through it all. And the first impact they get is that 35-word statement that you made. That's your hook. If that hook grabbed the jury member assigned to you, your advocate, your person who's going to represent you in that jury, if you grab them with that 35 words and they got through your nomination and they really believe strongly in your case, they're the ones that are going to be making your case in front of the jury. Next slide. So there are 7 members of the jury, only 6 of them vote. By the time the staff have divvied up these nominations, they've got to make sure that you are not in some way connected to one of the jury members. So if you happen to serve on a local or state or national committee with one of these jury members, they will not be your advocate. If they're a member of your firm or interest in that regard, they're not going to be your advocate. And as it would be, they're going to spend 10 minutes maybe on your submission. Only 6 of them are going to vote. The advocate does not vote. And then if there are no conflicts and you get the minimum of 4 votes, then you're elevated. If your submission doesn't receive the required number of votes, or is in some other way conflicting, then they'll set it aside until the end of the process and revisit all of those submissions. Next slide. So this can be challenging. Do you have a national exposure? Do you have a national ripple effect? And what are those ripple effects? In the case of Category 4 individuals, in my case in particular, my reach is only within my county because that's my jurisdiction. So, I wouldn't have an opportunity to do a project, say, in New York. So getting that national ripple effect, you might have to explain how it could be if you had the ability to do it. And again, golden thread, you're looking for the golden thread. Make it bright. Leave no room for confusion. Next slide. So Aaron talked about the sponsor letter and the reference letters, and except for a table of contents and the cover, they're looking for not more than 40 pages. All of these elements make up that golden thread we've been talking about. Make sure you hit on each one of them. Next slide. So if you're in design, they're going to want a distinguished body of work. We're all architects. We've all wielded a pencil or a pen, and the jury is looking for exceptional work. They'll find that through publications, through awards, the impact on the practice, lecturing, leading the institute. These are all important. Next slide. I would only modify this slide to say one thing, and that is they're not looking to find out if you got an invitation to speak or you got an invitation to serve on a jury. They're looking to see if you actually spoke or you actually served on a jury. These are important distinctions. Next slide. So if you've led the Institute, they're looking for national offices held, local regional offices, serve on California AIA board as an example or a committee, jury service in some capacity. You've got a few articles, you've participated in conventions, and you can demonstrate your impact and ripple effect. Rona?
That was just great. Thank you. So myths, I talked about myths. So I'll just go over this generally. One myth is that it has to be all fellows supporting you. That's not true. As my colleagues recounted, it can be you have to follow the instructions, but it has to be a combination. And if you don't get it the first year, and you could apply in 3-year chunks. The same submission is good for 3 consecutive years, and you have to add reference letters. Those can be even non-architects who have asserted your contributions, clients and others. All the reference letters do not have to be AI members only, as I mentioned. You don't need to drop a lot of big names. You can use, you have to, as Robert described, people that they need to know you. Michael mentioned, and have knowledge of your work. And if you're the client, like Emily, Robert, and I were, you can call on your consulting architects. You can call on the users, members of the public who are your governing officers. If you're in the military or government, these are people who can attest to your broad impact. Object one, one myth that you can't get elevated without national awards. Object one, you have to have awards, but it doesn't have to be national awards. The jury is not looking to fill quotas, and there's no recipe about it. Second guessing. People have asked me, well, what will they like this or will they like that? Well, it's not what they'll like. You're making your case. So, think about it like some other prosecutor in court, in a way. You're making your case. Lay out your case, and in a focused manner, as Aaron said. Next slide. Any one category, it can vary greatly from year to year. Again, you have to be clear and concise and focused. You have to make sure all the sections are coordinated and tell the story. And they don't want to see your resume. I had that experience. Not your resume, but what you do incrementally as an impact on the profession. As Robert said, the golden thread. As Aaron said, the ripple effect. It should be two or three third-party reviewers. Yes, some chapters do have a developed committee, so we're going to give you some resources, like, for example, San Francisco and Los Angeles. These are big chapters. They have been coaching fellows for a long time. Some of the smaller chapters, people called me, can I take another look? Can I be a mentor? So this is a process. As you reach out to our regional reps, they'll help you find a path to work with, depending on what's available in your chapter and in your area. You can start early. We've been answering questions in the Q&A. Someone asked, well, when do you start? So I like to tell the story when I was elevated, I brought my then young adult daughter and I said, what do you think? And she said, everybody's old. Everybody doesn't have to be old. There are young people, mid-career, early career professionals who have very substantial experience. One year, Joel and I had two recent graduates of the Harvard Graduate School of Design, and brand new graduates. And the woman told us, well, we're getting started. So thinking about your career path, of course, you don't always know how it'll go, but if you're thinking about your career path, you can think about this as a goal, the way you would think about working in a certain kind of business or doing a certain kind of work. This is that kind of long-term goal that isn't time dated. But I would say it's much harder for late career professionals who haven't accumulated the incremental impact of contributions to get started. And it's probably going to be a better path for younger people who have thought about it over the years. Finding fellows who are supportive. Yes, there are many fellows who are supportive. I'm hoping we can reach out to emeritus fellows, retired architects who are fellows who can coach the younger generation. AIA California, we are here to create resources from our 21 chapters and nationally. I myself, being part of a national public architects network, I've now sponsored or recommended about 10 different people, one in the Middle East and others all over the United States in different types of positions, the Army, university architects, people who come from state and city government. So if you've worked with somebody, you're a member of the Academy of Architecture for Justice, or you're part of the Architects for Education, and you met somebody in San Antonio and she's been knowledgeable, she can work with you. So it's not limited necessarily to people who are right here. Yes, as I said, you could do 3 tries and then you have to take a break for a year and start over, new references, new submission. But many people don't get it on the first try. I was one of those people, and there are many, many others. So as the chair in San Francisco has told people many times, competing with your peers, people who are very accomplished, and don't be discouraged. It takes time and many resources. There are samples. There are hundreds of samples. AIA National, every year they publish up the best. One of the best ones was a public architect in Ohio. I was one of his recommenders, and his was one of the best on a I think it was his second or his third try, Lane Booker. So you can look at those successful submissions that stood out, and you can also pull submissions from people that you know and take a look. They're available online. They're not privileged. I think someone put a question in the chat, but we'll get to it. Okay, so we are going to publish a number of links. We have links to contacts in our chapters. We have links to some of the committees, and of course, all the national information that's out there. Before we start losing people on the turn of the hour and get to additional questions, I just wanted to say that I can't see who's on necessarily, but all of us, all of you are the future of the profession. You will be our successors, the next generations, and you will have a ripple effect on all of your work, whether you're a private practitioner, or you're a government architect, or you're in the military, construction manager, or an educator, or you've taken another path. You can achieve recognition by your peers through fellowship. It's a great honor. It's a lot of fun. You meet great people from all over. It's getting more diverse, and we want to cultivate that. We are available to you, your regional reps, volunteering, of course, their generous time and sage advice to direct, to guide, to support. And I want to also thank our staff of AIA California, Nikki Dennis Stevens, our Executive Vice President, who's on, and her executive staff, Amanda. They're very excellent and always available to provide support. So it's 3:49. We have some time. We've answered a number of questions in the Q&A, which will go into the record. As I said, you can really start any time. We're going to publish this up, so you'll have the available information. I'm not sure if we've provided the contact information for our regional reps, but they'll be reaching out. When I did it, we reached out through our respective chapters in Northern and Southern California. So that's usually how it's done. Let's see.
Rona,
Yes.
someone has their hand raised. Joseph.
Let's see. Who is that? Let me take a peek.
Joseph Catalano had his hand raised.
I'm just going to scroll down here. What? Oh, that's me. Sorry. That was an accident. Using consultants. Robert answered this question. So one person I worked with in New York did use a consultant. Some people do use consultants. Some of our members work as consultants, but someone said to me, well, do I have to spend $5,000? No, I didn't spend any money on it. I did it myself as a government architect, took a lot of Sundays, and got a little help from some people who knew how to do the graphics. Back when I started, it was all done in hard copy. This was a great burden for me not being in the practice, whereas now it's all electronic submissions, but you do have to be very rigorous about, read it very carefully. It's like when you do an RFP. I had people who submitted RFPs to me and they were 5 minutes late and they got disqualified and they got mad. If it says 5:00 p.m. on Friday, October 21st, 2021, make sure it's date stamped on time. Those things matter when you're applying for work, and they matter when you're applying for awards. I will say that the cycle, there's a cycle every year that starts sometime around now, and some of the, if there's a committee, they usually reach out to people, and then they guide, but some people work on their own, and then it ends sometime in October for the next year. So unless you're in that cycle, it's better to think ahead a year.
Yeah, I would say that if you're not started by now, for this October, you have a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
So it can be done. People have done it. Just have to work fast. It's ideal to start in January. There was a question here, and that we meant to touch on the during our presentation, and that is you have two ways of being accredited for your nomination. You can either have your chapter support you, or you can get, I think it's 5 letters of recommendations from AIA members. So you could do it either way.
I think the 5 need to be fellows, but
Yes.
check on that.
And that's another, again, maybe needing to check the actual website because they change those rules slightly each year.
Probably just so we don't formulate some kind of template and just crank them out.
I don't know if anyone wants to add to any of the
Well, I did want to kind of touch on this idea of whether you hire someone. We had some robust conversations over the last few weeks, whether it was necessary to hire someone. And Rona is very clear that, you know, she doesn't have those resources because of being a government employee. And so she was able to do it, and it's very possible to do it on her own. Over the years, I've had the pleasure of having, you know, graphics and marketing support. So I've been kind of lazy, so to speak. And so I hired an editor, and that made all the difference in the world.
Yeah, I had heard that from some others. I sponsored someone who's in Israel. She's EU, and it was very hard for her to pull it together and work. She worked with somebody in New York. So yes, if people have the resources, it can be helpful, but it isn't, I would say it isn't critical, and you can do a quality submission if you have the means to do a quality submission on your own.
Joseph Cantaleno still has his hand up. Joe, do you still have a question? If your mic is live, just pop in there.
Oh, what?
Oh, it's okay to pop in now?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Okay, good. Thank you. I don't have it right in front of me. I'm Joe Catalano from Pasadena and Foothill chapter. I don't have it right in front of me, but I'd seen somewhere that it stated that submissions are welcome on all scales, all size projects and practices and so forth. And I'm a sole practitioner. I'm submitting in Object 1 preservation, and I would like to know how we rectify the idea of working on a smaller scale with which could many times be local or regional importance, with what you have been saying this afternoon about national impact, national awareness, so on and so forth. Could you help me understand this?
I don't know, Aaron, you want to take a stab at it?
Sure. And I would recommend you dig out Naomi Murillo's nomination. I think she was in 2018 or 2017, but she did it in Object 1 preservation with a very narrow focus. So if you have a small practice or a very local practice, really find that thread that sets up a message that then gets carried on by other people across the country. You may not have to have carried that message, but other people may have. So, you know, preservation is is kind of a different category within Object 1. So I would look at, there are now several more preservation nominations in Object 1, but look at the examples and you'll see how people are more narrow. I think Naomi's was preventing the demolition of vacant buildings.
Thank you.
May I say something about the timing of preparing a submission? I am often an outlier in that, like Rona and Robert, I was a public architect. I was a university architect at Berkeley. And I thought off and on about submitting for fellowship for a couple of years and didn't do very much about it. But when I decided to do it was not until the summer before the submittal was due. I took some time while I was on vacation, several days, to think very seriously, kind of like a charrette, about what my thread would be, how I would put it together. And then I spent 2 months while I was working full time, working on it. And I'd like to say that I was unable to do it in thinking about working on it over a long 6 to 8 to 10 month period. And I want to encourage people that somehow can't work at that kind of time frame to understand that you can do it in a compressed way if you think carefully about how you want to present it and if you organize your time correctly. So in encouraging people to, I'd just like to encourage people to do it in whatever way works for them and not feel that you have to have all the time in the world to put your package together. That golden thread, that you can be thinking about that for a couple of years, but you might be the kind of person that can do it in a shorter period of time. It's a lot of work, but give yourself, respect your own work style, I guess is what I would say.
I would echo what Emily said. It took me 2 years before I could get the story clear enough to then even begin to put the thing together. So.
And again, keep it simple. Look at examples from other submissions and pick the most simple, straightforward graphic presentation. It does not have to be a piece of art. It just needs to be clear and concise.
We have a lot of good information in the Q&A. Yeah, and like, as they said, you can model yourself after thinking about, sort of people you look up to when you read about their career paths, even if you're an experienced professional. When I prepared it the first time, I had been in the corporate sector 15 years, in the public sector 2 years, but I put it in for category 5. And the feedback I got was, you're a 4. I'm not public, but the focus on the corporate. So I thought, well, I've done more as a volunteer architect in my pro bono work, which had been going on for a long time. So, getting that kind of feedback helps to guide you, and you can pick off from the different critics you have, remembering that it's better for people to be critical, because it will guide you, and it may guide your career choices also, in terms of how you frame it and look at yourself through the lens of your peers who have done the kinds of things that you've done. And some of the better submissions tell the stories in a really quite an amazing way. In fact, you can look at some of the other award submissions through the AIA. They're not all available online, but you can get them from the AIA librarian in Washington. I can give you her name. There are other awards that people have gotten that, if you're an educator, for example, that show you the path that the person took to merit an award, like the Topaz Award or the Whitney Young Award, if you're involved in social justice type of work. And that will also contribute to how you guide your future submission and frame the things that you do, joining a knowledge community, publishing up in a publication, mentoring in the public schools, or however it is you work in your path.
There were some questions about technically who can write letters and unrequested support and that sort of thing. It's pretty nuanced, but I did want to say that the jury is published on the website each year, and it is a disqualification if you reach out to any of those juror members. So if you know them, do not talk to them about your submission.
Well, they would have to disclose the relationship. Anybody who's a prospective juror should just recuse themselves from giving information in the first place, you know. But for example, I submitted for an award a few years ago and found out that one of my colleagues I was eating with was going to be a juror, and I told her she would need to expose that and then recuse, and then she was able to do that. And of course, certainly she was a bright person and she would have known, but it's always better to be straightforward about the recusals. And those of us that have served on juries, if the project happened in our team, well, of course, we're going to withdraw ourselves. And that's what you would expect. Even if elected officials don't always do it, it doesn't mean that it's a standard that we wouldn't keep, and we would keep that standard. And you should have confidence that it's an honest, fair, neutral process, and that you are considered relative to your peers in an equitable and full way based on the merits. That's my opinion anyway. We get any more questions?
Shared by many, Rona.
Yeah. No, I found people to be very, very good about it in the national juries. I served on a couple of national juries. We have any, the Q&A is showing 2 questions, but I don't see, let's see, open. Oh, are submissions reviewed anonymously? I think we just spoke about that. No, they're not anonymous. It's not like some of the design juries. It comes in without the firm's name. You can't put your name on it. You can't put a picture on it. No, the jurors will see, they'll know who you are because it's submitted under your name. You'll see that in the instructions. It's not anonymous. But anyone who knows you, or is part of, as Robert said, is part of your region or your chapter, will automatically recuse.
There's an application, national application as well. It's a document that you have to give lots of information in that. So it's not anonymous, as Rona would say.
Oh, what did she say? I'm curious if the National Fellows jury typically still has to be determined. No, I noticed that they've been assigned. In the AIA webpage for the College of Fellows fellowship, they have a jury tab, and the tab will give an update and announce who the jurors are for each cycle. I think Robert's right. I think they've all been assigned, and I think it's a 3-year term, and they rotate out so that it's geographically diverse, and also there's a juror from each object at a minimum.
Really quite a matrix to kind of figure out region and object and, you know, who's been on, who's not been on, and all that business. Yeah.
Yeah, they work very hard at it. I think the national staff does a really excellent job. I didn't know we're at 4:05, so we're a little bit early, but then our president, Brett Doherty, likes to do things on the early clock, and I'm kind of on architect standard time. Yeah, things run over. So I didn't know, here's the contact information, but please work with your regional representatives, Michael Enomoto at Gruen, Southern California, Robert Uli, County of Santa Barbara, Southern California, Joel Tomei, Northern California and San Francisco, and Aaron John Highland, Northern California and San Francisco. Emily Martinson will, Joel's 3 years will be over and she'll rotate in next January. I'm available through my personal email and AIA California, certainly Nikki and Amanda and I and our executive staff and our regional fellows and other fellows in AIA are more than happy to, privileged to work with you and help guide your professional advancement.
And I did want to add one thing. I have heard, and I don't know how true this is, but sometimes by the time your jury member who's been assigned, they're doing 35, 40 of these, by the time they get to the P's or Q's or R's, they may be only reading this the summary page. So it's very important to be very clear on your thread.
Yeah, I'd say that's true. But, for Robert and Emily and me, those of us that work in the public sector who have to go through hundreds. One year I got like 2,500 submissions for architects that wanted to be selected for courthouses. And you're right. I mean, how do you do it? And we did it a lot like the jury does it. You do one round and you have your, keep it and maybe and toss it, just based on, did they put everything in there? Check. Is it late? Check. Is anything, and then you do the next round. And sometimes it's based on, is it readable in the first place? If it's not readable, legible, then it might not get the consideration. And legibility is not just graphics, but what does the content actually say? Anything that looks like somebody's resume, it's not going to get to the next round. It can't read like a resume. It has to read like a narrative that tells a story. At least that's my experience. Let's see. I'm just going to take a look here and see if there are any other open questions. Answer. No open questions. We'll give another minute. Any other hands? Anyone want to ask a question in person? Again, thank you, Joel. Joel developed the source, the substance of the presentation for our San Francisco group. It's been especially successful in San Francisco. We really have a good time every year doing a panel, and there's another panel next week on the 15th, and you're certainly welcome to join us. The content is substantially the same, but we get a little bit different composition of people, and of course the questions vary. And thank you, Joel and Michael, Robert, Aaron, and Emily. Emily's dropped off, Nikki, and others for coming. We had very good attendance, and we hope to be working with some of you.
And thank you to Amanda for corralling us.
Yes.
Us wild
yes.
cats.
Yes.
Yes,
Thank
you did
you
a
all.
great job.
Thank
So
you.
I think we're going to adjourn, and thank you all very much, and good luck. Bye.